Good morning to the listeners, viewers on the World Wide Web, on YouTube, Facebook, all the social media platforms. Welcome to our Sunday morning presser from the opposition office. Today is Sunday, the 18th of February, 2024. This morning I am Member of Parliament for Pointe-a-Pierre, also the opposition chief whip. I am joined with my colleague this morning, who will be presenting after me, MP Ravi Ratiram, Member of Parliament for Couva North. And he would have some interesting things to inform us this morning after my brief presentation. I apologize if I have a little cough during the course of my presentation this morning, but I'm still under the weather, so to speak. Let me start off this morning by, as part of my presentation, in the headline that we have seen one witness since the 7th of February, the oil spill that is taking place presently in Trinidad and Tobago on their west coast. And one of the headlines in today's papers, oil spill can have long-term impact on the Tobago economy. Now, Friday in Parliament, the opposition members had raised a matter of urgent definite that was approved by Parliament to be spoken at 6 p.m. But I'll get into that, but let me start off this morning and state to the listeners out there, today, as this nation faces the oil spill in Tobago, as I would have mentioned, Minister Young has kept his usual playbook. Minister Young is the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, has kept his usual playbook of no answers, no action, and no accountability. Whenever there's an energy-related crisis, Minister Young, as a regulator, runs away from accountability. Whenever, and I repeat, whenever there's an energy-related crisis, Minister Young runs away from accountability. And we have had so many different crises in the past. For example, the Nikon explosion that took place in Pointe-a-Pierre in Marabella, the 4 divers who lost their lives in the Paria pipeline. We had a death of Mr. Alain Ramkisoon and the Nikon compound last year. And then recently we had another death of one Mr. Rossi Mansing while working on the former ArcelorMittal steel plant in Point Lisas. And all these companies fall within the remit of the Ministry of Energy and also the ambit of Minister Young as a substantive Minister of Minister Energy and Energy Industries. So once again, like this oil spill that has taken place since February 7th, we have gotten no clear answers from Minister Young, even when he spoke on Friday in that urgent matter on the adjournment. And I also posed a question to Minister Young during the course of the Parliament sitting on the urgent questions. And I asked him, what is the status as at Friday of the oil spill that is taking place in Tobago? And only on Friday, I think the THA Chief Secretary had a press conference around 3:30 that afternoon. And he called on the central government to be more accountable. The THA Secretary, Farley Augustine, said more transparency is needed from central government. At Friday's sitting of Parliament, the opposition exposed this government, and more so the Minister of Energy's lack of political will, his lack of determination, and more so his total disregard to be honest to the population on what has caused this crisis when we debated on our definite urgent matter of public importance on this oil spill on Friday. The Minister of Energy stood there accusing, as usual, accusing the opposition of being ignorant and having a lack of understanding when he stood in Parliament on Friday to tell us that this vessel probably, I want to repeat it, these are his words, when he told us in Parliament, Minister Young, that this vessel probably overturned in international waters and then floated into Tobago waters. So after 10 days or more, now I think it's about 12 days, so after about 12 days, a minister who boasts about knowing all, and remember he's a Gary Sobers, has no clear idea up to now on the real cause or location of this accident. The Minister of Energy, who wants to accuse the opposition of lacking understanding, told the Parliament that agencies were helping to trace the owner of the vessel. If such exists, now I want to repeat that, Minister Young told us on Friday that the his agencies were helping to trace the owner of the vessel, and he said, if such exists. But were able to, and he was able to ascertain, he told us that in Parliament. He told us in Parliament that the vessel was carrying bunker sea fuel on its way to Guyana, having stopped off in Aruba. So I want to pause there. I want to repeat what I just said. On Friday in Parliament, when Minister Young was debating in the urgent matter of public importance on this oil spill, in his 15-minute presentation, he told us in Parliament that he's aware of where the vessels came from. They came and where they were going. They came from Aruba and they were going to Guyana. These were his words in Parliament. So I asked Minister Young this morning, and I also asked him on Friday, who are you really trying to fool? So Minister Young figured out what the vessel was carrying in Guyana, but he isn't sure if the vessel has an owner. So this is some sort of magical stray vessel with no owner. Does Minister Young and the government really know who are the owners and just trying to protect the owners of this vessel? Is it that the owner of this vessel is linked to some energy deals in Trinidad and Tobago, either within Paria or Heritage? Is it that is some part of distribution chain associated with these companies? We in Trinidad sell fuel, we buy fuel. So could the Minister of Energy categorically say for sure that this vessel had zero dealings with any energy entities in our country? They have people with bunkering licenses in this country, and some of them who own these bunkering licenses are lawyers. On Friday, the Minister of Energy told us that immediately his ministry implemented a national oil spill contingency plan, which is on the website of the Ministry of Energy, and they were taking the lead, or they took the lead. But that is the furthest from the truth, because in the past days, beyond a few picture ops of the minister in Tobago, it has been the THA bearing the burden of this crisis. So we ask once again for Minister Young to come clean and tell us, if he is telling us on Friday he knew the vessels came from Aruba, he knew they were going to Guyana, he knew what they were carrying on the vessel, but he cannot tell us who are the owners. Up to now, after 12 days, they have not been able to seal off this vessel that is still leaking oil as we speak today. This government has not been able to seal off this vessel, this barge. It is a barge that is still leaking oil in Tobago waters. So we want to ask Minister Young and the present government why it is that this government is not triggering Tier 3 based on a national contingency oil plan. Why it is that they are not triggering it to go to level 3. Are they afraid that the international intervention will reveal the true owners and dealings of this vessel? And we are aghast, and I think even Chief Secretary Farley is still wondering why have not we been carried this to a level Tier 3 in getting international assistance in sealing off this vessel that is still, this barge that is still leaking oil as we speak. Is Minister Young and the government, like they aided in all other crises, a cover-up? We ask these questions. We are asking these questions. It is totally incomprehensible that on Friday, the Minister of Energy could stand in Parliament and tell this country that after producing oil for over 100 years, we as a nation cannot seal off the leak that is taking place on a barge in Tobago. Out of all the expertise in this country, Minister Young has been unable to gather any expertise to seal off this oil leak. Ask yourself why. We ask that question. Ask yourself why. The fact is, it was the UNC who created this National Oil Spill Contingency Plan back in January 2013, even before the Labrie oil spill. But over the years, this government has failed to train, as required by the plan, the proper human resources to deal with an oil spill and carry out proper research to deal with crises such as this. And if you look in today's daily newspapers, I think one of the media it gives you a history of the amount of oil spills that have taken place in our country over the last 8 years since this government has been in place. What this ordeal has clearly shown us is that the Minister of Energy is not a man for an energy crisis. We have 3 major energy-related catastrophes, and each time the Minister Young has failed Trinidad and Tobago. He has failed us in the Nikon explosion in Marabella, which I am the MP for Pointe-a-Pierre. He has failed us on the Paria divers incidents. And again, I think he has failed us in this cleanup of this oil spill. So on Friday, Minister Young told us, and we only found out on Friday, that Minister Young, when in his presentation for 15 minutes, told us that he went to Venezuela the day before. So the day before, I think either Wednesday or Thursday, he was in Venezuela, not to discuss the oil spill in Tobago. And we are now asking, why did Minister Young go to Venezuela 2 days or last week, Wednesday or Thursday? And it was not, according to him, was not to discuss the oil spill. But when he arrived, he was happy that the people in Venezuela wanted to discuss the oil spill. So we asked the question, because you see, Minister Young always seems every other week to be in Venezuela. And we asked the question, what he was doing in Venezuela. What was Minister Young doing in Venezuela last week, Wednesday or Thursday? Was Minister Young trying to salvage, and we asked, the drug and gas deal? On the 23rd of January this year, last month, something unique occurred in this country. Every single independent senator voted with the oppositions for the opposition's motion in the Senate calling for more accountability on this drug and gas deal. Yet this government continues to disregard accountability on the drug and gas. It was thanks to the Venezuelan Gazette that we learned that the people of this nation received some information and was able to get some information on this drug and gas deal. But today we demand some more answers on this drug and gas deal. The Prime Minister told us that we should not worry because we will not be affected by the licenses that will expire in April, the U.S. sanctioned licenses. It doesn't affect us. This is what the Prime Minister said. We are safe, according to the Prime Minister. But what the Prime Minister has failed to tell this country is really and truly what would happen after April when the first 6 months ends based on the USA sanctions. I want to refer to a few articles in the Venezuelan Gazette. And there's a timeline that we as citizens of this country must relate to. Article 3 of the Venezuelan license requires that the licensees, which is Shell and NGC, to start and deliver conceptual engineering phase within 6 months of the licensee being published. So the 6 months would run from 6 months from January 29, 2024, and takes us into July 2024. That's the first 6 months. Article 4 gives Venezuela 3 months to accept or approve the conceptual engineering phase. This will then take us into September 2024. Article 5 states that the licensees, which is Shell and NGC, must complete the basic engineering phase within 18 months after the approval of the conceptual phase, which places us into March 2026. We have not even started to drill for gas. These are just the schematics, the planning, and it will take us into, if all things being equal, without any further negotiations, without any further stumbling blocks along the way, we are talking about March 2026 before anything starts to happen with drug and gas. So I ask the question, the opposition is asking the question, what we supposed to do until March 2026? This is what we should be asking the government. That is why the independent senators, along with the opposition senators, ask for more accountability on this drug and gas deal. So today we call on the government to come clean and to really tell us the true story about this dragon gas. Today we pose these questions, dragon gas, because in last week, we received confirmation of another catastrophic and financially crippling news for the national economy, with the largest methanol producer in the world announced in an article last week that it would be shutting down one of the largest methanol plants in the region, the Atlas plant based right here in Trinidad and Tobago in Point Lisas in September this year. The decision is confirmation that the downstream sector under Minister Young and this government has all but collapsed. This is confirmation that our energy sector is still in trouble and collapsing despite all the old talk by this government that they have stabilized the energy sector. What does this mean for the people of Trinidad and Tobago? It means that our national revenue, our tax revenue and foreign exchange will be reduced significantly as our methanol production is reduced by at least 1 million tons per year. And I just want to draw some information that came out, I think, this week on Friday. The latest economic bulletin by the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, January 2024. And I asked the media to look at it. And when you look at some of the numbers in the energy sector, everything has fallen. The energy sector production fell in the third quarter of 2023. And I just want to read out a few numbers. Crude oil production fell by 9.1%. Natural gas production fell by 10.8%. Ammonia fell by 15.5%. Methanol fell by 3%. Exploration of oil and gas fell by 6.1%. These are not the opposition numbers. This is the latest economic bulletin by Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, January 2024. And it has an impact on our natural gas and our downstreamers in the Point Lisas industrial estate. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at what is happening in our country based on low production of natural oil and gas, our downstreamers, the plants are not operating at 100% capacity. I think most of the plants, because of the lack of gas in the Point Lisas industrial estate, operate somewhere between about 60% capacity, and it impacts our foreign exchange, it impacts our revenue. Now, something is interesting on our order paper in Parliament on Friday. There is basically the Minister of Finance, and we are not spreading gloom and doom, it's right on the order paper in Parliament, and it's a motion brought by the Minister of Finance, which will be debated I would assume, in the coming weeks. And basically what that motion says by the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Finance has placed a motion to increase the development borrowing limit in our country by an additional $10 billion. $10 billion. So what Minister of Finance in a nutshell is coming to ask to have some fat, some leeway to be able to borrow up to a maximum further $10 billion in this country. $10 billion. And if we just read a budget back in October 2023 for the financial year 2024. And when you read, if one remembers that debate, Minister of Finance and the government were saying everything is nice, revenues are up, you know, our deficits are coming down. And now you see on the order paper a motion where the Minister of Finance is coming to ask to be able to borrow a further $10 billion in our country. And I am sure our opposition leader will have much more to say on these borrowings that has been only astronomical and keep rising year upon year, even against all the stories that the Minister of Finance has said everything is nice in our country. So we ask, what is really happening that the Minister of Finance needs to borrow a further $10 billion in our country? So the Minister of Finance is aware that maybe, and we ask, maybe there's a massive revenue shortfall that is taking place in our country. Because there are certain things that the Minister of Finance was supposed to bring to our Parliament before, like closing off the books and really having a better understanding of what is the true deficit of the financial year of ending in 2023, And to date, we really have not had a clear picture of what that deficit is. So, and I just want to say that because of the Methanex plant being shut down, there are certain things that has happened in our country over the last 8 years. And I just want to put that to the listeners and the viewers out there. Our natural gas production has gone from 3.5 billion standard cubic feet of gas to 2.6 billion today. That alone tells you that our plants cannot operate efficiently given the lack of gas. Atlas, the methanol plant, is shutting down as there's a gas shortage because this government failed once again on deep water bid rounds for the past 7 years. Atlas is shutting down because there's a gas shortage, because this government has failed year after year to offer proper incentives for upstream companies to invest in exploration. I want to stick a pin here. This government, over the last 8 years, has done nothing in trying to incentivize our energy sectors, our energy companies in our country to explore for further gas and oil in our country. This government has placed everything on this dragon gas and the relationship with Venezuela for the past 8 years. And nothing is wrong with that. The dragon gas is supposed to complement what we have going on in our country. So if this government was serious, this Minister of Energy was serious about exploration, they would have done what is necessary, like what happened under the PP government led by the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, in incentivizing our energy sector to ramp up and explore for natural oil and gas, which happened is that we were able to get the Angeline and the Juniper on stream. That is what has saved our country for the last 8 years. But this government has taken a different aspect, and we could never get the answer why they have not really been aggressive in incentivizing our energy sector to continue exploring for oil and gas in our country. All their deep water, shallow water has failed because it lacks incentive. Now, before I close, I want to ask a thing about Minister Young. Why is Minister Young so silent on this Atlas shutdown? The country has to ask that because it will impact our revenues, it will impact our revenue, our currency, our foreign exchange. Why is Minister Young so silent, given the grave news that Methanex will decrease production of methanol by $1 million per ton in the coming year? Over the years, he has boasted about methanol production. This is Minister Young. And I want to say something here before I end. This is the same minister that boasted in the 2023 budget, which is in October 2022, that his government was negotiating contracts in advance for methanol production. When he said, and I quote, for NGC to have gas to supply the downstream petchem plants, they need contracts. This is critical. You do not wait a day for a contract when a contract is about to be expired, or even a few months before a contract expires. You should begin discussions, negotiations, and pushing for the continuation of contractual terms so NGC has gas to supply ammonia and methanol. What happened to these negotiations, we ask? Were they all just fallacies created by Minister Young? Why is Minister Young so silent on the Atlas shutdown, when in 2023 budget he boasted, Minister Young boasted about the profits earned from the negotiations of his government with methanol producers. And I quote, the government standing behind the management of NGC while they were negotiating contracts with the ammonia and methanol producers. I am pleased to report to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, this is Minister Young's statement. It means that as ammonia and methanol prices went up, they too have gotten the benefit of those high prices at NGC, as NGC has declared phenomenal profits in the last 2 years as a single result of the government standing firm with the fortitude and being very, very convinced that we are doing what is right for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. This is a statement by Minister Young. Is it that these negotiations with methanol producers 2 years ago were just temporary, but Minister Young gave this country a false sense of hope? Back in 2022, in the media review, Minister Young was buffing me and saying, I don't know what we speak about. 2 years later, today,
We have been vindicated for highlighting that the increase in the revenue earned was not due to increased production, but rather high global prices. And there was always a risk to our production with our gas shortage. This is the same Minister of Energy, I want to remind you all, the same who told CNN on the 10th of May 2022, everybody remembers he went on CNN, that Trinidad and Tobago was ready to ramp up gas production to supply the war in light of the Ukraine war. This was the same minister was telling CNN internationally that we stand ready to ramp up our gas production. But yet today, we see in September, the Methanex, or one of the largest methanol companies, will be shutting down. We are at a crisis. Whether Minister Young or Prime Minister Rowley wants to say it, we are at a crisis. That is why Minister of Finance is coming to borrow up to a further $10 billion. He has laid a motion on the order paper, and the leader of the opposition will say much more on this. So, as I end, ladies and gentlemen, I have MP for Couva North coming on to give his presentation this morning. I still want to ask Minister Young if he knew where this vessel in Tobago was heading with the oil. They came from Aruba, they were heading to Guyana. He is saying that, and up to date he cannot find the owners, he cannot find the owners of the barge to be able to get the plans and the schematics of how the barge was built, the layout of the land, so that the divers can seal it off properly and know where to seal it off. And we ask the question, why after 12 days we are no closer in finding the owners to be able to get that information? And the other question we want to ask before I leave, why we have not raised the tier 3 that I think the Chief Secretary is asking for, to raise it to tier 3 where we can get proper international assistance. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time this morning, and as I ask my colleague, the MP, distinguished honorable colleague, the MP for Couva North, to join me here and to for him to present to you this morning, I thank you, and we look forward to MP Ratiram.
Thank you most kindly. Thank you most kindly, our Chief Whip, Shadow Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, MP for Pointe-a-Pierre, and Deputy Political Leader, Dr. David Lee, for that very informative and mind-opening presentation exposing this incompetent, uncaring PNM administration and the issues surrounding. A pleasant good morning to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Kamala Prasad-Bisasa, and my parliamentary colleagues. Good morning to members of our communication team who are here with us, members of the media who are joining us locally, regionally, and internationally, my brothers and sisters here in Trinidad and Tobago, and those who are joining us internationally via the various social media platforms. Pleasant good morning to one and all. This morning, I'm going to use my time to discuss with you the oil spill in the southwestern coast of Tobago and the impact that this oil spill is having on the various sectors, the various industries, and the various stakeholders. Brothers and sisters, today being 12 days after a vessel had run aground and overturned off the coast of Cove with hydrocarbons spilling into the ocean, and this government doing absolutely nothing to stop that spill, is a testimony of their incompetence, a clear dereliction of duty, and an indication that they have totally expired their usefulness if ever they had any. To attempt to fool the population once more of this ghost ship, this Gulf Stream, and trying to foist upon the population that they don't know and hiding from the population, it really leaves us to wonder, how do they think about the citizens of this country? Do they think the citizens are foolish that are going to believe this stupid rhetoric that they are attempting to peddle, when they know for a fact that there was a tugboat associated with this Gulf Stream by the name of the Solo Creed, and the radar system, the national surveillance system, the radar system, clearly picked up information on these vessels. They want to push an agenda for the population to swallow, that they have no idea who the ship belongs to, where the ship comes from, etc. Well, I want to ask the government, who are they really trying to protect? What it is that this government have to hide? This government, according to the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, this government has to be more transparent and more accountable to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Chief Secretary made a statement to the media on Thursday, the 8th of February, and this was reported in the Newsday newspaper just one day after the vessel was found. And the headline of that article stated, "Tobago may need international help after oil spill." I want to go into the article. The THA Secretary, Fali Augustine, says, "There is a strong possibility Tobago may need international assistance to address the environmental fallout from an oil spill caused by a boat found overturned on Wednesday in the sea about 200 meters off the coast of the Cove Eco-Industrial Park." That article continues where Chief Secretary, addressing a news conference on Thursday at Scarborough Lay-by, Augustine acknowledged that fishermen, beachgoers, and islands tourism sector will be severely affected by the oil spill. He told reporters the situation was grim, and he's quoted here, "We have at this time the threat level elevated at Tier 2, but we anticipate that in the coming hours it may very well be elevated to Tier 3, Augustine said. In the Parliament on Friday, the Honourable Prime Minister indicated that they have activated the 2013 National Oil Spill Contingency Plan, which of course was developed by the People's Partnership under the leadership of the Honourable Kamala Prasad Bisesa by our former Minister of Energy, the Honourable Kevin Ramnarine. And I want to take a moment to make reference to something that was put out in the public space by the Honourable Kevin Ramnarine. This states from Kevin, 11 years ago, I triggered the National Oil Spill Response to Tier 3, and within 24 hours, a cargo plane from OSRL landed with equipment to combat the spill. With oil spills, especially in the open seas, you have to respond fast. This is arguably a much larger spill than 2013's spill. The Gulf Stream is still leaking, and we still don't know the quantity of liquid hydrocarbon inside it. It is going a week now that it is leaking. And I thank Honourable Kevin Ramnarine for his contribution and his contribution to the energy sector during that period. The Prime Minister, making reference to this National Oil Spill Contingency Plan, where the plan clearly outlines the different categorization of oil spill levels of the different tiers and the corresponding responses that are required. So folks, I want to share with you from the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan where a Tier 2 and Tier 3 are defined. Tier 2 spill are small or medium-sized spill where significant impacts are possible and areas or national support for adequate spill response is required. Let me repeat that for you. Tier 2 spills are small or medium-sized spills where significant impacts are possible, an area or national support for adequate spill response is required. Tier 3, on the other hand, Tier 3 spills are normally large spills requiring substantial resources and support from regional or international oil spill cooperatives to mitigate effects perceived to be wide-reaching, that is, of national or international significance. And this is extracted from the NOSCP. On Friday Friday the 16th, it was reported in The Guardian, Tobago spills enter Grenada's marine space. And this is how far this oil spill has actually reached, brothers and sisters. Quoting from Guardian newspaper, Grenada has contacted the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency and other partners as possible oil from the Tobago oil spill has entered their marine area of responsibility. Brothers and sisters, it is clear that this government has failed to act in a timely and a responsible manner. They have failed to recognize this is clearly a Tier 3 disaster, and they have failed to invite the international agencies to provide the necessary assistance and to treat this matter as a matter of urgency. While we look at support from the international agencies, brothers and sisters, I must take the time this morning on behalf of the opposition to congratulate all local skill set and all the boots that are on the ground in Tobago assisting with the containment and the cleanup exercise and the work that is being carried out on the ground at this point in time. However, brothers and sisters, it is important for us to understand the neglect that has been carried out by this government with their failure to attack. Brothers and sisters, you all will definitely recall the Paria incident where the government failed to act. They failed to act in a timely and responsible manner, brothers and sisters. And you all know what was the outcome of that Paria incident, that sad tragedy that up to now the families continue to be affected by. That incident, brothers and sisters, today there are 4 widows in this country as a result of this government negligence that we must never forget. Today we are calling on the government to activate the Tier 3 response and invite the necessary international agencies to assist in having this spill contained and to bring to an end the continuing destruction of the Tobago's ecological environment and now that of the neighboring countries who may also be a threat. Another part of the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan that I want to touch on this morning, which is a very important section of the plan, is the preparedness section. Under the preparedness section, there is the assumption in the event of a major oil spill in the terrestrial and marine environment, the following assumptions are made. And the first assumption that is put forward, A, is that the first priority will be the safety and preservation of life of person and personnel. I want to repeat that. The first priority will be the safety and preservation of life of persons and personnel. Brothers and sisters, we are day 12 now. They do not know what is leaking from that vessel. They do not know the toxicity of the chemical that is being spilled into the sea and reaching our shorelines, that is spreading throughout the ocean and that is migrating all the way to the waters of Grenada and possibly Venezuela. Do they know if the spilled chemicals are carcinogenic? Do they know that? What testing have been completed thus far? And what are the results of those tests? Why is this not being made public? Why the results of these tests, we are at day 12, not being made public, if they have gotten any results thus far? The government has a responsibility to ensure that the health and safety of everyone involved in the containment and cleanup activities are preserved. every single one who is participating in this cleanup exercise, the government has a responsibility to ensure that their health and safety is preserved, brothers and sisters. They also have a responsibility to preserve the health and safety of citizens in the neighboring villages. It was reported by the Newsday just a few days ago in an article entitled "Fishermen and Friends, Tobago Oil Spill Could Get Worse." The article stated that villagers had to leave their homes in the Lambo area because of the stench emanating from the spilled chemicals. Because of that scent that these villagers were exposed to, they had to leave their homes. One resident was quoted as saying, on Wednesday, when the incident had just happened, you couldn't even stay in the area. The stench was horrible. Another resident from the same area, who gave his name only as Hiram, said he was aware of the incident on Wednesday when he came home from work and asked about the stench. Brothers and sisters, we need to ask the question and we need answers. Is continuous air quality monitoring being conducted? Are they conducting continuous air quality monitoring? Are these residents being exposed to volatile organic compounds or any other harmful pollutant exceeding the permissible levels and compromised air quality? What are they using to clean up the spill at this point in time? They need to come and tell the population. The National Oil Spill Contingency Plan clearly has an organizational chart to guide the process, and in that organizational chart, it speaks of an information officer who has that responsibility of putting out this information into the public space where all stakeholders are concerned. What are they using to clean up? Are they using dispersants? What chemicals are being used? If so, if any chemicals, are these chemicals all approved by the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs? Brothers and sisters, these are very pertinent questions, especially taking into consideration we also have a team of volunteers on the ground whose lives and health are at risk. With respect to the volunteers, are these volunteers properly trained as per Appendix Q of our National Oil Spill Contingency Plan? What level of training has these volunteers undergo? Because there's a simple volunteer form that one can fill out going on the TEMA website. Brothers and sisters, we also need to call on this government and to make their risk assessment public. Was a complete risk assessment done? Has the risk been identified? And are all measures put in place to mitigate against these risks? This risk assessment must be made public to be scrutinized by all stakeholders and all persons involved. At this point in time, I want to turn to the fisheries section under the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, which I have been given the responsibility as the shadow minister on the opposition benches. And I want to ask the question, is the waters of Tobago safe to fish? What testing was done to declare that the waters of Tobago is actually safe to fish? We need to hear this information from the government. And if testing was done, what were the results of these tests? Testing not only of where the spill occur and where the drift occur, but testing of surrounding waters need to be carried out as well to determine if it has been contaminated in any form beyond the obvious visible hydrocarbon. You see, brothers and sisters, contamination in an oil spill is not only what can be visibly seen through staining, but crude oil is made up of hydrocarbon and other compounds. So it can have chemicals in the waters that are not visible. So it has to be tested, brothers and sisters. The testing has to take place. In addition to that, the seafood that is being sold in Tobago, are these seafood being tested? Where is Food and Drug? Are they part of the system that is conducting the tests and putting out notices out there that the seafood in Tobago are safe to consume? At this point in time, we are at a very important venture. We are at a very important period in the Christian calendar. We are observing the Lenten season. At this point in time, during that Lenten season, people utilize seafood for their source of protein. They avoid meat and they utilize seafood during the Lenten season. We saw newspaper clippings where the fisher folk indicated that the price of a fish would most likely be increasing during this period because there is definitely going to be a shortage in supply of the seafood. The fisher folks have been grounded. Vessels from Scarborough to Blackrock have been grounded by the Cove, Rockley Bay, Lambo. All these fisher folks across that region, across that area in Tobago cannot ply their trade, cannot go out and earn a living, earn an income to put food for their families on their table. What is this government doing at this point in time to show compassion for these families? What this government is doing at this point in time to take care? There is absolutely no communication whatsoever coming from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. And I call upon Haji Senator the Honorable Kazim Hussein to break your silence and come forward and speak out and say what it is that you are going to do to help and to assist these fisher folks. This government clearly lacks empathy. We saw that we needed an inquiry, a commission of inquiry into that Paria tragedy for them to hear for themselves that there is a humanitarian side to the natural disaster. There is a humanitarian side, that there should be some kind of compassionate grant in place. Brothers and sisters, this morning we in the opposition are calling upon the government. While it is that the contingencies plan speaks of compensation, which will happen in a long time from now, hopefully, if the government uphold what is expected of them, how these families are going to make it through this tough, turbulent time. How these fisher folks. So we in the opposition, we are calling upon this government, we are calling upon the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to institute a compassionate grant for the fisher folks of Tobago, to assist these fisher folks and to assist the families of these fisher folks. Clearly, brothers and sisters, this government have not learned from the Paria incident. All we have seen coming out of it from the government side is the Prime Minister going to Tobago for photo ops, posing for pictures in Tobago, and absolutely nothing different. The Chief Secretary and the THA continues to pilot, continues to spearhead, continues to do what it is they are doing there, and central government fail to provide that national security information on these vessels, who are the owners of these vessels, where really these vessels came from and were going, etc. This Prime Minister has shown total lack of consideration, care and compassion to the people of Tobago, brothers and sisters, and he must be called out on it. It must not be left untold. The story must be told, brothers and sisters, by all the citizens of Trinidad and of Tobago. It is imperative that the government takes swift and comprehensive action to contain the spill, mitigates its impact, and provides support to those whose lives and businesses have been upended. Brothers and sisters, it is time for the government to prioritize the preservation of our environment and the well-being of our fishing community. Hence, I call upon the government once more to take immediate and decisive steps to address this crisis and ensure that those affected receive the support that they desperately need, brothers and sisters. The failure of this government to effectively respond to the oil spill represents not only an environmental catastrophe, but also a profound failure of leadership in this government. All citizens at this point in time, my brothers and sisters, must stand in solidarity with the people of Tobago and our fishing communities and demand accountability from those entrusted with safeguarding our natural resources and the well-being of our people. With that said, brothers and sisters, I thank you all very much for this opportunity to present. I also want to share with you that in addition to this oil spill issue, the number one issue affecting the citizens of this country is the issue of crime. Our leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, the leader of the opposition, continue to fight for the citizens of this country to ensure that your safety and your security is upheld, and at least that the government move towards providing safety and security for our citizens and improve the current system. And as of such, our leader has begun the opposition anti-crime consultation across the country, starting in La Jolla, going to San Fernando, and on this Monday, the 19th of February, from 6 p.m., all are invited to join the leader of the opposition in her anti-crime consultation being held at the Chaguanas Borough Hall from 6 p.m. We will be starting promptly, and it will be streaming on all our social media platforms. With those few words, I once more thank you. I thank my colleague, MP David Lee, and now I ask if you all have any questions that we will try our best to respond and to answer.
Thank you, Honorable MP for Koba North, distinguished Ravi Ratiram, on that comprehensive presentation on the issues that are happening in Tobago and the oil spills. So we await for any questions from the media. I think there's a couple.
Yeah, I have one question for MP Lee, and that is with regard to the item on the order paper. You had mentioned that the Minister of Finance suffered an increase in $10 billion in the borrowing limit. Was there any indication from the Minister why he put that, or is it the case, as you have made, that this is in anticipation of declining revenues from the collapsing energy sector?
Well, first of all, that motion that came on the order paper, it appeared on the last order paper. And it really tells a story that there, in our view, based on that motion where the Minister of Finance is asking for an additional $10 billion, it paints a picture that the revenues that the minister would have expected from the oil sector, especially the petrochemical downstreamers, the revenues are not there to fulfill what he had. On Friday when Dr. Bodo had asked certain questions about certain schools in his Faizabad constituency that were not completed, the response from the Minister of Education basically said that the work is shut down because of lack of funding. Now, these are schools that were shut down and not completed, or no work is being done because of lack of funding. I also have information that during the Christmas period, that no repairs were done on schools during that Christmas break of 3 weeks. No repairs were done, and that's because of lack of funding, I am told again. So we are seeing that is why maybe the minister has brought this motion on the order paper to ask for an increase in the development loan fund to a maximum of by a further $10 billion that he wants to get his hands on to be able to run the country. So I think, I know for a fact the opposition leader has signaled to her team that we are looking at it very closely, because over the years, over the last 8 years, you would have seen a host of borrowings done by this government. And it is scary, and it paints a picture that the revenues are not there in this country.
A question for MP Ratiram. You suggested the creation of a compensation fund for fisherfolk and perhaps others Do you have any estimation as to how much compensation might be needed?
Well, thank you for that question to allow me the opportunity once more to highlight the call. And it's not a compensation fund that I made reference to. What we are asking for is a compassionate grant. A compensation fund will be worked out for compensation for damage to the assets, etc. at the end of the exercise. But at this point in time, what is happening is that fisher folk cannot ply their trade in the areas mentioned. Plus, there is going to be a loss of earnings for fisher folk across Tobago because now the seafood in Tobago has been compromised. Fishers migrate, fishers feed in one area and swim to other areas. That fisher folk can catch those fishes and recognize that there's traces of hydrocarbon, etc. if they are visibly present and may have to dump their catch. That's one, so it's less productivity from the fisher folk. And then for those who actually catch the fish and come to market, land these fishes, there's going to be a loss of confidence from the people. So the sale itself is going to fall. So fisher folk across the island are going to be losing revenue, losing income, loss of earnings. And where is the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, the Honorable Haji Kazim Hussein? Why he hasn't spoken out on this matter as yet. So this is a compassionate matter. This is a compassionate grant to be able to provide for these fisher folk so they can provide for their family. That is all they do. They make a living. They earn a livelihood from the waters of Tobago. If nothing is done, what is going to happen? So thank you very much for that question, and I do hope that we do get some positive response from the Minister.
And I also have a follow-up question. When you were speaking about the possible contamination of seafood and testing needing to be done, are you aware at all of the capacity of our relevant institutions to be testing the seafood?
Well, one thing I can tell you is here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a lot of resource with our public servants out there. We have great resource. We have solid institutions. What we are lacking in this country is leadership and the management of these resources. I am certain if Food and Drug is to be deployed, if it is that we are to use Kariri, we are to use different labs in the region to have these things tested, it can be done. But the question is it being done at this point in time? We have not heard a single report that testing is being done and that the seafood that is being sold at XYZ location are safe to consume. So now naturally there's going to be again a loss of confidence in the entire fisheries sector in Tobago, and some level of compassion needs to be demonstrated.
Okay, thank you, MP Ravi Ratiram. As we end, I just want to remind all of us that tomorrow we'll have, as MP Ratiram said, we'll have our third anti-crime consultation at the Shogunas Borough Hall at 6 p.m. And all are invited. The general public is invited to come and listen and vent and hear your views, ask your questions. I think we have a very Professor Cujo is one of the presenters tomorrow, Selvin Cujo, and we all know the strength of Professor Selvin Cujo and his writings in the daily papers. So again, I want to thank you all this morning for being here, listening, and taking the time to be with us this morning for our Sunday morning presser by the opposition office. I thank you.